Good morning, and on behalf of Mobility Ways, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this latest Thought Leadership webinar. Many thanks for your participation. For those new to Mobility Ways, we are a leader in transport decarbonisation and the leader in tackling commuting emissions, a Scope 3 carbon category, through our comprehensive Measure, Reduce, Report framework. The aim of these regular sessions is to support learning and invite collaboration on topics which are typically centred on advancing place-based sustainable travel. That said, today's webinar is a little different as we dive into an adjacent topic, one that also starts with S, social value, as we ask the question, are you social value savvy? To allow for a deeper dive on this topic, and because we believe today's content will generate a lot of questions, we've allocated 90 minutes for this webinar. So whether a buyer or a bidder, today is your opportunity to ensure you come away with clarity. Clarity on the distinction between sustainability and social value, why social value is a core foundation of procurement processes across both public and private sectors, what outcomes are desired from social value, and the commercial opportunity that exists from being social value savvy. And so I'm delighted to be joined today by Amy Hazlehurst, Strategic Account Manager from Social Value Portal, and Rebecca Oxby, Procurement Category and Monitoring Officer at South Tyneside Council. Welcome to you both, and huge thanks for your participation today. Amy and Rebecca will each present for around 25-30 minutes. Each session will then be followed by around 10-minute Q&A. This, if my maths is right, should leave sufficient time for a wrap-up Q&A involving both Amy and Rebecca before we then conclude the session. Throughout the session, please do submit your questions. This is really important, along with general queries and comments as they come to you via the Q&A function. So yeah, just get them coming through. We want a steady stream of questions which we can answer. If we don't get to all inputs during the webinar, we will follow up over email. Plus, with this session being recorded, a link to the video will also be circulated. Okay, right, enough from me. Over to the stars of today's show, and kicking things off, I'm pleased to welcome Amy from Social Value Portal. Amy, over to you.
Thanks, Graham. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I must admit, speaking into my computer for the next 30 to 40 minutes does feel a little odd, but hopefully there are some people behind the screen ready to get social value savvy, and some of the wisdom that I've learned from the 2.5 years working with local authorities all around the country in implementing this solution will help. And there should be some things to learn throughout the content today. So I believe next slide is I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions. Let's go through the agenda first. So I've got roughly half an hour to talk you through some of the basics of social value, and I do want to learn just a little bit about who we've got on the call, how social value savvy you are feeling, and indeed what lens you come, whether that be from public sector, private sector or third sector. But today, hoping to take you through what social value is, an introduction to our way of viewing that, and the way in which we've helped public sector organisations, private sector organisations to quantify, measure and report on what social value is as well. So an introduction to the TOM system and how that's been used. A couple of examples of where that's been used, both in local authority setting, combined authority setting, but equally on the private sector side as well, and some of the work we're doing to take that global, which is exciting. Stay until we get to the point where I can take you through some top tips, both if you are a bidder or a buyer, ways to approach social value to make it less scary, more structured, but equally help you deliver more for communities in the ways that you want to. We'll have a quick tip quiz to test knowledge, and then a Q&A at the end. So as Graham introduced, I'm Amy Hazlehurst, Strategic Account Manager, and I work with roughly 36 different local authorities and public sector institutions all across the UK, trying to implement this solution and get better value for their communities. So please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'd be delighted to continue the conversation with you a little later. So let's get that poll up. Let's see if the tech works. I think this is the time where we can raise it. Fantastic. Thank you, other Amy. So quick question just to gauge who we've got in the room then. Where are you joining from? What type of organisations you work for? Are you public, private or third sector? If you could just answer now, we'll give you 5 seconds for that one. Magic. Hopefully that should be enough time. If we can flash up the answers, who's joining? Great. Okay, so of 56 people on the call so far, we have a good split then. So mostly private, 16 public, fantastic, and third sector 8 as well. So it should be quite a varied question set when we get there. That's great. Thank you so much, Amy. Hopefully not too onerous, and something that you can answer fairly quickly. Please don't feel embarrassed. I'm hoping to just be able to understand and gauge how we can go through this and tailor the content to everyone's needs then. So next poll should be coming up. Fantastic, thank you. So poll 2, how would you rate your social value maturity? So are you joining today as a total novice? This is a whole new concept to you, or are you leading the way? And then 2 in between there, developing knowledge, mature practitioner, and leading the way. You absolutely know your stuff, and creating waves in the market. Just five seconds to answer on that one. Just want to gauge who we're speaking to today. Okay, great. Let's pop up the answers. Okay, that's good to know. There's no one leading the way. We're all learning this together. I'd hoped that I would be getting a split about that. So that's absolutely great. So developing knowledge, hopefully there'll be some nuggets of information in here, things that you can take away, a few novices to it. So that sounds like a great time for me to therefore move into what social value actually is then. So next slide, please. Great. So before I tell you a little bit about where we come from in our understanding of it, it feels appropriate just to tell you a little bit about the organisation that I joined from. So I work with Social Value Portal, probably an organisation that a lot of you will know, might be new to some of you. SVP has been going now for actually 11 years, but it felt out of place for me to change the figures that look so round on this slide to that. But 11 years as of the 1st of September. SVP has been leading the way, working with public sector, private sector, responding to the Social Value Act that came out in 2012 to essentially create a framework in the market, a way of measuring, quantifying, and moving the social value journey forwards for different organisations, a way to maximise your impact. We have worked with hundreds of private sector, public sector organisations, even more private sector organisations, but the big number on here that I think is really interesting is that number of projects delivered. So that's actually tenders, private sector, real estate projects, lots of different things that are going on in the UK and beyond. Over 10,000 projects, nearly 11,000 now actually, have been recorded and quantified within the portal, which gives us a really rich database to understand what the social value landscape is saying. We've got another number on there that's really important, which is that we pledge as an organisation and through our members to deliver £100 billion worth of social value by the end of 26. And we're well on our way. We've actually hit 56 billion as of the last month. So we're certainly over that halfway point and really excited to see the way that that's going to grow. So hopefully that gives us good grounding then to explain what social value actually is. If we can click next and then next again, please. Everyone has slightly different understandings of what this really is, but I think a definition that encapsulates all, and certainly the way that we see it, giving it a pounds and pence value, is seeing social value as the currency for conducted, responsible, sustainable business. So what we're talking about there is all the different types of activities that you as an organisation and indeed within your supply chain might do that go above and beyond your standard practices to contribute positively to the economy, community, environment. So we're looking at all of the positive things that you might do as an organisation that contribute to the economy, community, and environment. So it's about positioning your purpose next to your profit to create a win-win situation. So the triple bottom line is a public-private partnership. We see it as the doing good that really emphasises what doing good as an organisation should be then. And if we move to the next slide, I want to position Where this sits alongside some of the other terms that we see coming through, because social value isn't new. I would say it's an evolution of an ever-growing movement and something that's been in place from a philanthropy perspective, from a CSR perspective for decades, if not even longer, centuries. So where social value sits in comparison to its neighbours of ESG and CSR is quite interesting, and specifically in the context of why we've been invited today by Mobility Ways as well. So social value really sits in the middle between ESG and CSR. And what we mean by that is ESG tends to be about mitigating risk. It's about compliance. It's about making sure that you're not harming the environment more and trying to mitigate any risks that are coming from your activities. CSR is the doing good in society, but it tends to be not very structured. And what we find social value is the intersection between those two. So it's moving from compliance to additionality, and it's that additionality point that becomes really quite important when it comes to procurement and tendering for public sector work as well. Next slide, please, guys. So I'm hoping that it's going to become more and more clear what this is, and where it might seem like a scary concept for any of those that are novice and just joining, you'll actually start to learn through this presentation that there's a lot of this that you're actually already doing. So it shouldn't be too onerous, and it's about capturing some of the things that you're already doing and encouraging slightly different behaviours where you're not. So there's just 6 examples on screen here, all examples of social value. So employing locally, training, sustainable procurement practices, having apprenticeships, reducing carbon emissions, volunteering. If we click next slide, we'll see that what we do as an organisation and why we are the market leader really in this is that we have a full team of economists that are put in Tom system section to explain why we do that and what that value is. But it's about positioning your social value activities alongside your bottom line if you're in the private sector, and in the public sector having a quantification to the activities that might be offered to you in a tendering setting to understand which is worth more to the society that you're working in. So they're all activities that you could do, and indeed there's actually 117 different types of activities that you can do in the Tom system and the menu of options that we've got there then. Next slide, please. Just to give you some of the stats as to why this is important then. So it's not just a nice to have, actually. Social value is growing in an exponential way, as the graph will show. So I mentioned that we've got over 10,000 projects on the portal that we are now measuring. It means that of that data set, which is by far the largest that exists, we can see that there's been a 3,000 increase on social value that's been reported annually since 2017 when we capture the data from. It's led to an increase that has actually seen 18.8 billion pounds worth of social value reported in 2024 alone. So in terms of the way that that grows and what that means, that 56 billion worth of social value, in terms of breaking that down, behind each of those numbers, the numbers are really only there to give you a concept of scale as to what those activities are worth to society. But actually behind each of those numbers is a job, is a person being trained, is a carbon ton being reduced, it could be a volunteering hour, and all of that is positive attributes that you are contributing to society. So in our record of data so far, over 15,000, nearly 16,000 jobs for people struggling to find work, for example, be that needs, disadvantaged by disability, unemployment, long-term unemployed, ex-offenders, nearly 16,000 jobs, 24 billion spent in local economies, 1.25 million weeks worth of training and apprenticeships. And specifically for this webinar, very, very pertinent to say 3.36 million tonnes worth of CO2 that has been saved as well. So we can see it's a growing movement, and the legislation is moving that way. The Procurement Act is growing towards that. Global legislation is moving that way. It's something that you can't not know about now, and winning work depends on knowing more about how you can contribute on this as well. Next slide, please. I'm going to get bored of saying that. Okay, so why does it matter to you? I hope that some of these will resonate with you, both whether public sector, private sector, third sector as well. But the top line I've tried to make here specifically about public sector reasons why social value matters to you, and the bottom line more on that private sector side, albeit still relevant in some cases. So budgets. Budgets are tight in the public sector. You will not go a day of the news without hearing that now, particularly in local authorities, having gone through years of austerity, rising costs. And if we can leverage that spend to deliver more, that is what social value is about. It's about delivering more for the taxpayer. It's about being able to get more for your budget, making sure that when you spend, that spend is going towards delivering more for your community as a consequence of spend that you have to do. So not just delivering the service, but what additional things can happen as a consequence of that spend. The compliance piece, so I've got a slide that's going to touch on the latest compliant and latest legislation towards social value, but ultimately there are now obligations, legal obligations that you have to fulfill. And if you were to get a freedom of information request to say, why is this supplier won a particular scheme and then they didn't deliver social value, we want to be able to mitigate against that. So benchmark performance, create some compliance and meet the legal obligations to deliver social value. Aligning with the supply chain is quite an interesting point. So we work with both public and private sector, and ultimately there's a lot of private sector organisations that will see a social value question, but just don't know how to answer it. They might want to give better for your communities, but they don't know how to answer it. So we've done a lot of work creating an evaluation framework and creating the TOM system then for measurement and contract management, aligning with supply chain so that they can deliver on things that you really want to deliver in your local area and make it needs focused. On the private sector side then, so it's about winning more work. Of our thousands of projects in the portal, we've actually done some analysis to prove that not only will a bid be based on price and quality, but actually those that have won are twice as likely to win if they had the highest social value score. So it really can make the difference between a win and lose. If you are competing against an organisation, one of your competitors who has roughly the same product and roughly the same price, having a good social value offer where it's worth 10, 20, sometimes 30% of the marks can be the difference between win or lose. And certainly our strategy consultants do a lot of work around that, making sure that people can understand their competitive advantage from a social value perspective. Delivering more for communities, that's fairly obvious, driving the positive change that we all want to see, and attracting and retaining talent. So we've got data that shows that 79% of people will say they want to work for an organisation that's delivering on a sustainable future, and that is certainly a way to do that. Next slide, please. Great, so I'm going to quickly touch on some of the legislative side of things then. So if you are in procurement, or indeed if you're attached to procurement in any way, you would have heard about the Procurement Act that went live in February. It's been coming for a long time. It is the biggest change in a generation in terms of the way that procurement rules work in the UK. If that is of interest to you, then I certainly recommend going and having a look in the way that it's changed. But from a social value perspective, just a couple of things that are worth mentioning. Where it always used to be about the most economically advantageous tender, so meet, all about getting price and quality and driving the best bargain that you possibly can. Now it's about maximising public benefit. So we've changed from meet to most advantageous tender. So we're looking at that public benefit that you can bring as a consequence of that project. It's about the wider benefits that you can deliver. And equally alongside that then comes into the transparency and accountability perspective. So there are now 17 different notices that a public sector organisation may have to complete as a consequence of a contract. And essentially it's saying, have you done what you said you were going to do, and using KPIs to deliver on that. So you can no longer promise the earth and not deliver it. That will actually be public record, which will affect whether you can get a contract again or not. So making sure that you're recording what you're doing and delivering more on your contracts is a big thing. We also have the National Procurement Policy Statement, so the NPPS. So this is it's election cycle based, so this is reproduced with every new party that we have in power. The latest one came out in line with the Public Procurement Act, and it's focused on Labour's 5 missions. Now we actually work very closely with missions as well, so we've aligned all of our work to that as well, but it's essentially about what long-term value you can bring as a consequence of that contract. There's a renewed focus on working with VCSEs and SMEs, and it's all about building capability within the supply chain and making it easier and more digital, more transparent, to be able to work in a public-private way. Next slide, please. So sector side, and actually I would say this is relevant for all organisations, one thing that we are working hard on at the moment as an organisation, certainly my work with the public sector, is to take social value out of the procurement setting in the public sector and out of the bidding setting in the private sector, because social value should touch every single aspect of your organisation, be that in the way that you sell and engage your prospects, be that the way you talk about yourselves and your marketing resources, human resources, attracting, training, retaining talent, finance. Are you going to get investment if you don't report on these things? Sustainability, tracking your goals, the S and ESG, procurement, who are your suppliers that you're working with, contract management, investor relations. Social value is literally relevant in every single aspect of what you do, and it's important that it's seen as that, as a strategic lever to deliver and as a strategic lever to get work. So please bear that in mind and have that as a talking point around the coffee cooler, in your conversations in the boardroom. Think about the way in which you can deliver social value and how that touches every aspect of your team. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think that's the point at which I'm going to start talking about the Tom system. Let me have a quick sip of iced coffee, pistachio latte. It's delicious. Make yourself one. Not paying $5.60 for my coffees anymore. So the Tom system: themes, outcomes, and measures. I'm going to introduce you to the widest used framework for measuring and quantifying social value impact. This slide touches on why the TOMS was developed, the ways in which you can use it, and how to navigate those challenges using a framework like this. So I would say that, starting on the left, it is a way of starting out, like actually putting pen to paper as to what social value you deliver as an organisation and the ways in which you could change your activities to deliver more. Get to that additionality point. Proving impact. So the pounds and pence value helps with that, positioning your profit alongside your activities, your social value activities. Needs focused. So we wanted a way to be able to look at what is actually needed in society and evolve activities towards the needs of the place, the people, and the community that exists there, the local suppliers, actually working together in that public-private partnership perspective to be able to deliver more for communities. Navigate the complexity of procurement, which, let's face it, is complex. It is incredibly difficult to work with public sector until you're in there. So we want to be able to add social value to the agenda in a way that lets it thrive, rather than just be washed out in all the knives of procurement. Amplify your success, show what you're doing, have case studies, be able to prove what you've done. If anyone says, what have you done for social value, you can actually talk about it, you know what you've delivered, and indeed meet those regulatory requirements that I spoke through as well. So they're kind of the challenges that the TOM system has been set up to respond to. And next slide, please. I think I'll start to talk about where it came from. Great. So the TOMs have been going directly in response to the Social Value Act that came out in 2012. It is a framework that was developed with the National Social Value Task Force. So that was a group of 40 public sector, private sector, and third sector organisations to create what is essentially a list, a menu of different activities that you can do, a menu of options to a suite of a menu of solutions to a suite of problems that exist in society, and have one consistent way to talk about social value activities and level the playing field for all. There is a pounds and pence value to it, and that's why we say the social value pound. Okay, now to explain what that social value pound is about, because we get a lot of questions about this, we can talk about the bottom line as to who is actually being affected on society, but what that pound value is there to do. On the public side, it is a way of evaluating. It's a way of evaluating two entirely different bids to be able to say which is worth more to society. It is then on the private sector side, a way to actually position your social value activities alongside your bottom line. And that is basically it. It is not for anything more than that. It is simply to be able to compare and contrast, to be able to benchmark, to create some comparability, and to flex on what types of interventions are actually required in society. So it is purely about putting it on the table. What happens from there is that lives are changed, and we can start to talk about the stories of people who are being impacted by your work. So it stands for themes, outcomes, and measures. I think that's on my next slide, but I'll talk to it to this bit for now. We align it with lots of different frameworks, the UN Sustainability Goals, of course, being the global one, the social value model being the central government model, but also GRESB if you're in real estate, and also the 5 missions, for example. So we can align those themes to different ways as well. And next slide, please. Here we're just talking through some of those principles as well then. So themes, outcomes, and measures. Now, themes, all of the different visionary components of what a good society would look like. That's what we mean by themes. Outcomes, that's what we want to see. So the positive outcome that we want to see, the change we want to see in society. The measures is the intervention itself. The measure is the activity that would lead to the outcome, that would lead to that theme for society. So we've got work, economy, community, and planet. We've got 4 themes: work, economy, community, and planet. We've then got a list of outcomes underneath that and 117 measures underneath that. We narrow it right down. We never expect anyone to deliver on all of those. Generally speaking, in your tenders, you might see 30 to 40 measures to choose. And dependent on the size of the contract, it might be that you make a submission against 5, 10, 15 of those measures. So it's scaling it right down from having a full menu. You're in the Chinese restaurant, there's loads you could choose from, narrow it down to what you want to achieve, and then you deliver against that. Okay. Relevant, choose what's relevant to you, choose what you can do. No double counting. So the intention is that if you deliver against a certain measure, you're not going to count against a different measure. It's only valued just once. Additionality, I keep mentioning that. That's what it comes from in the legislation. So it's about social value interventions that go above and beyond the contract. So if you were delivering a waste contract, the fact that you are recycling hard to recycle waste, for example, that's probably part of the contract. That wouldn't count as additionality. But if you were doing an IT contract and that was part of what you do, that could count as additionality, for example. So that's what the additionality point means. Attribution, we're only reporting against organisations that show what they're responsible for. And transparency, all about giving clear evidence and guidance based on the TOMS guidance that we've already specified. So you have to deliver, stop that social washing, show the evidence of what you've actually delivered as well. Next slide, please. I think I've gone through a lot of this: themes, outcomes, and measures. 4 themes, vision, we can see what those are. So let's go on to the next slide and see what that looks like in practice then. So I've mentioned the pounds and pence value, the proxies. I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to touch on where those proxies come from. So we've got a team of 12 economists that work in an SVP of our team of 100. They are looking at the data all the time. They are looking at publicly available data, localized data, IMD data. We work with the HM Treasury Green Book methodology to essentially add a pounds and pence value to an activity. And what we're looking at is that it's a theory of change model of doing things, where we look at the input, output, outcome, and impacts. We can talk about that more if anyone was interested in that bit, but that's the theory that we use to look at the benefit to the individual, be that in extra salary, having a pension, career progression, long term. The benefit to the community, it might be in crime prevention, for example. It could be in having less waste in the streets, so whatever that might be. Benefit the community and benefit to the taxpayer as well. So reduced cost as a consequence of that person being employed, or less health concerns, etc., etc. So that's where the theory of change and how those value blocks are actually created in the proxy values then. Next slide, please. The TOMS system. So this is where I just wanted to talk through how it works. And this is really what the SVP is doing in the background, the platform is doing in the background for you. But this is how it works in practice through the themes, outcomes, and measures then. So sorry, I'm just giving myself a bit of boost in power. Let's follow it through. So we've got theme, outcome, and measures. They're just example measures there and example outcomes. But if we were to look at the work one, for example, the work theme is all about local skills and local employment for all. We have an example outcome of creating employment opportunities for everyone. We have an example measure. It could be hiring an ex-offender on a project And we measure that in terms of the unit, which is full-time equivalent, having someone employed for a full year or a percentage of that year, and we give it a proxy value. What we'll do is then take the proxy value by the number, how many of those people you have employed, and that is what gives us our social value pound. We do that for all of the different activities that you may have signed up to. So let's say the 10 to 15 different measures, and that is what will give you the quantified outcome there, the proxy value pound. We're also looking at the qualitatives. So can you provide evidence? Have you got a delivery plan? Have you already got connections in the local community? And we're measuring both. So it's a qualitative and a quantitative framework for evaluation and contract management and delivery. Hopefully that makes sense, but happy to answer some questions on that if we go forwards. Next slide, please. I just wanted to flash up some of the planet ones that we have here. So here are just some of the planet ones that you might want to consider, particularly given the audience I'm sure we've got from Mobility Ways today. But some of the relevant ones that you might want to consider. So NT53, for example, is an innovations measure where it could be a capture all of anything that you're doing. Reduction in scope 1 and 2, and that's certainly going to fit in with some of the work that Mobility Ways might be doing. Support for green spaces, for example, reduction in plastic. So they're all things that you might find you're actually already doing, but this is the way in which you'd be able to capture that. And then certainly it's a side of social value that we want to encourage more of. So that just gives you a list and examples of different planet measures as well. I think I'm starting to waffle on this now, but I think I've already said this. It is the qualitative and the quantitative. So the quantitative then, that's the social value pound that we've gone through. So we can see on here as an example, we might be talking about 515,000 of social value that's being created as a consequence of hiring 10 long-term unemployed people. When you submit that, alongside that, you'd be looking for some supporting evidence. So examples would be duration of the employment, their employment status, length of the contract, how you're going to hire, who you're going to work with to get that person employed, for example. So it's about telling the full story and then having the evidence of the lives that you've changed thereafter. And that's what we try to build into a system like this. And that's why it's candidly being used as far as it is. And I'm sure Rebecca will take you through that in a little bit more detail as well. Next slide, please. So this just gives you an idea as to some of the donations, some of the activities that have happened so far as a consequence and in our member chain. So just seeing what that aggregation looks like together in the real lives that have been changed behind that. So even just looking at some of these in terms of the weeks of apprenticeships that have been done, millions of tons of carbon that's been saved, jobs that have been created, donations, it all adds up, and it's having all of that together to be able to tell that story and using the pounds and pence value to drive that both in the boardroom, in the public sector as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so couple of quick examples then. We are working with over 250 organisations now, both public and private, and indeed there's a lot of work starting in terms of international expansion as well, and growing the TOM system to have an international dollar way of measuring social sustainability as well then. So you can see some names on here that you might recognise. I work with the public sector side, so some of my members include West Yorkshire Combined Authority. I'm working with Rotherham's a great example. I've just started some work with South Yorkshire Combined Authority. We're doing some work with the Welsh Government. We're working all over the country, and that gives us a really rich database as to what good social value actually looks like then. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those examples. Next slide, please. WICA is a fave. Now there's lots of data on this. I've left it in so that you could read it at your leisure thereafter, but West Yorkshire Combined Authority have been working with us since 2021. They are measuring social value on all of their contracts above 100k. So anything that you apply for above that 100k mark, you will be asked to submit a social value offering using the TOM system. And as I said, it's about working out where your expertise lies, looking at what that organisation is actually looking to achieve, look at what the broader visions and missions are, what Tracy Brabin's trying to do across West Yorkshire. And from a transport perspective, they've got their mass scheme that they're looking to spend nearly £3 billion until 2040. So they've got a lot of spend in that transport region, showing that you can do more on that planet theme will be really important to them. And they've taken the TOMS and running with it. So they're doing some really great work. It doesn't need to be groundbreaking, as Paul says here. It just needs to make it, just needs to make a difference. And that's what they're really looking to see in your social value bids there. Next slide, please. Also wanted to highlight a private sector side. So Aquans do work up and down the country, doing a lot in the facilities management space, regeneration, energy services. They have been measuring social value on the portal for a long time, but you can see even just in a single year, they got 56 million worth of social value. So that when you start to look that out and quantify what that looks like, hundreds of hours worth of work experience. We've got over 500 different types of initiatives that they've done on the project, nearly 13,000 hours worth of career support. It's capturing all this data in one place and being able to tell that story. And certainly Aquans has run with that and done a really, really great job in terms of what they're doing up and down the country as well. Next slide, please. I just wanted to touch also on some of the work that we're doing with more international organisations as well then. So if you have a scour through the internet, have a look at some of the reports that these organisations are putting out. Mars, ISS, Admiral, we're doing some really great work with these as global institutions and global organisations who are starting to use social value as their competitive advantage and take it wider. ISS is a great example. This is just launched in August, that we've gone public with the work we're doing with them to create the international dollar for their social value activities and start to introduce that global sustainability story using the TOM system in all of their operating markets. So we're creating a social value system for Spain, for Australia, for the Netherlands, and for Denmark, for Norway, in all of their centres to be able to capture the work that they're doing there. And that's really helping to push that agenda forwards to take social value global, really. So we very much work in partnership with our organisations, and it's organisations at ISS that are leading the way there, and it's great to see them doing so. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm getting to the bit that you really want then. So I'm going to try and run through this at pace because of time, but also give you the opportunity to take note from this then. So I'll start with tips for buyers and what we see as to what makes social value good. Social value in procurement doesn't work when it's treated as an afterthought. It has to be baked in from the start. I love that quote. It's so important. Social value is not something to add on at the end. It's something that should be baked in from the minute you start thinking about your contracts, pre-market engagement, working with your suppliers, making sure that it's delivered and contributed and managed and monitored all the way through a contract. And Rebecca will talk to you more about that then. Next slide. Finding your social value sweet spot. I would implore you to take note of this because it might come up in a quiz, but finding your social value sweet spot, I love a Venn diagram. This is essentially looking at what you can deliver, looking at the local need of a place, stakeholder priorities. So what is the organisation, what are they trying to deliver? If you were bidding for Sheffield City Council, where I'm sat today, what is it that they're trying to achieve? Look at their council plan, look at their objectives and match your tender response to that, but also look at what you can achieve yourselves. So what is it that the suppliers can deliver and working with them? So this is relevant both public and private, bidder and buyer. Look at those three things as to what you can deliver in an organisation. Next slide, please. What we've learned, again, I've kept this in so that you can see it afterwards. I'll pick out just a few of these, but certainly from the thousands of projects that we now work on, we know what works well, and we know those that are actually delivering more for their community. So just to pick out on 3 of these top 10, embed it in all your contracts. Don't make it a nice to have, and indeed the legislation now suggests that it should be. Make it a fundamental part of what you do. Those contract authorities that do 100k and above, they're the ones that are really seeing the results. They don't make it a question. It is just simply part of the status quo of what they do. Relevant to local needs. Have you ensured that you are looking at what local communities really need and then getting your suppliers to deliver alongside that, leveraging that spend to deliver more for your communities? Final one that I'm going to pick up on here is that number 8, contract management really matters. Getting a social value tender offer is one thing. Making sure that it has been delivered for your community, that's where the real fun begins. that is what you should be really focusing on. It's not just a procurement activity, it moves into the service areas, and making sure that that social value is being managed and monitored and it is being delivered. That is really key as well. So please make sure that you have your systems in place to be able to manage that delivery as well. Final one here is walk the work. You will already have your own social value footprint as well. So have a think about how you can embed and report on that as well. Next slide, please. Journey right to end, so showing it from the beginning all the way through. So looking at that value, looking to create at the end. It starts with need, having a strategy, building the capacity of the supply chain, ask your supply chain what they can deliver, embed it into procurement, making sure that management happens, and then constantly iterating on the fee on what's happening. That's how you're going to deliver for each of those themes as well. So I think that's my last slide on the public sector side, but certainly an aim and a strategy there on a page for you to work towards. Next slide, please. Okay, so final section is tips for bidders. If you can go to the next slide, this is really leads back to that social value being a full organizational strategy that I was talking about. It doesn't just sit in your bidding team. You have to think about your value box as to where you can get to a really good social value bid that you know you can then deliver. So look at your collaborations with suppliers, look at how you work with your workforce plans, how are you recruiting, how are you hiring, how are you looking at staff well-being and training, physical resources, how are you getting rid of things, how are you donating, partnerships, do you work with any local partners? Really take on board that whole value block approach, so that you can get to a point where you are delivering on a full social value strategy that is completely organizational led, and that's kind of the core approach that you should be taking for that when you're putting together a bid. Next slide, please. Think strategically. So I've brought up that social value sweet spot Venn diagram again. Think about what your buyer wants to see. Can you understand what their social value requirements actually are? Can you show that you can meet those? Can you show impacts that you have delivered in the past? What have you actually created that was relevant and proportional to previous contracts? Show that you can deliver that. And what can you tailor that's specific to this contract and specific to this local area? Can you show a track record of delivery? And what can you do to meet the local need, your capability to deliver, and their priorities as an organisation? So that's really the full offer that you're looking to put together. Thank you. Next slide. 6-step process here to take you through what you can deliver. So thinking about the foundations, tracking your progress, planning well, deliver, prove that you can deliver, tracking all of the things that you are doing, and show the expertise that you have from previous attempts at social value as well. I think that's it from me. I think. Have I got another one? That's it. That is it. Okay, right. Hopefully that has helped to organise your thoughts on social value, a big old whistle-stop tour as to what social value is, where the TOM system came from, how you can use it, and ultimately how you can use it to deliver for communities then. So we've got a quick quiz that we're going to pop up now, I believe, just to see if you were learning and paying attention. So question 1 then, fairly easy. Hopefully you can all get this, but one way of measuring social value is through the TOM system. It is the widest used. What does TOM actually stand for? Themes, outcomes and measures, total overall measures, or top operating modes? Choose your answers. 5 seconds to go. Oh, I think it's popped up again. I'm not sure if we've got the answer coming, but fairly obviously it's themes, outcomes and measures for this one. So hopefully you all got that one right. If we can pop up the next question then please, Amy. Great. Okay, so this is getting a little bit more granular on the detail, and it's more thinking about how the value blocks work in terms of that value to society, individual, and the taxpayer then. So looking at, we've got 2 questions here, looking at 2 different themes. This one is the work theme. So which of these measures do you think has a higher proxy value, so that pounds and pence value, and therefore a bigger social value footprint? So NT3, recruiting a long-term unemployed person. NT4, employees recruited who are not in education, employment or training, or NT5, an ex-offender aged 18 or above has been recruited. So 5 seconds to answer this one. Let me know what you think. Which of these will have a higher proxy value and more value to society? Okay, it's not plucking up the answer, but that's fine. So I will tell you. Great. So ex-offenders is the answer. Not sure how many of those got right. Now, bear in mind, every single one of these has a great deal of value to society, and actually it's flexed by what is the needs of that area. And in terms of what the data and the economics tells us, hiring an ex-offender has the greatest value to society. It's in a proxy value of 55,922. Reason being that is about the value to the taxpayer more as well. So seeing the value that has and taking that into consideration as well. Final question then is which of these measures do you think has a proxy value that's higher in the economy theme? So which has a higher proxy value and a bigger social footprint? Is it support to VCSEs through a volunteering programme? Is it expert support to VCSEs and SMEs? So giving your time as an expert to an SME or a VCSE, or doing personalised support to improve financial literacy of someone in that borough? Which of these do you think has the highest social value footprint? Okay, I'm going to go in with the answer so we can be done. So it's actually expert support to VCSEs and SMEs is the correct answer. The reason for this, and this is one that I think is really interesting, don't just go paint a fence. Use your time wisely as a bidder to help an organisation to go and deliver more. So if you are a HR expert, go and deliver HR advice to a VCSE or SME. That is worth more so that they can do the things that they're good at than it would be for you to go and paint a fence. So expert support, VCSEs and SMEs, that is worth £106 per hour per organisation that you help. And that one is the one that actually has the highest. Not to say the others count, but that is the one that has the greatest impact then. Graham, I've waffled. I've spoken an awful lot. Hopefully that was helpful. I'll leave it with you to decide how much time we've got for Q&A.
Oh, we've got a few minutes for sure. Thank you, Amy. That was fantastic. I think it was what 13% of people who were novices. So I think there definitely must be into expanding their knowledge section now. So, and I'm sure those 87% or whatever who are in the second phase are moving more towards leading the way. So brilliant. Thank you so much.
Hopefully.
There are some questions. I'll take a couple now, and I think we may pick up on some others later. I'll take them from the top as they came through. First one here from Ian Goodwin. Thank you, Ian. Does all forms of social value have to be delivered in the area where you are delivering the contract, i.e. community volunteering? Good question.
Really good question, and it's certainly something that we try to encourage. Where you can, they should be local. So not all measures are actually local. That you're working with will aim to have that social value delivered within that local community. So certainly for the economy measures, for example, local spend, local employment, they are certainly delivered within the boundary that they say. It's usually the borough boundary, but it might be wider dependent on what that contract is. Not all of the measures are, but most of them are, and where you can certainly try and deliver locally. And again, it's dependent on the type of contract as well.
Fabulous. Another question from Ian Kettle this time. Thank you, Ian. So we talked about obviously 3 areas of social value: economy, community, environment. Specifically around economy, what sort of deliverables fit under the economy area? Obviously, you talked about recruitment as one, but there's plenty more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually think the economy one is the one that has the greatest impact in a local area. If we think about social value being about spending locally, delivering more for communities, leveraging spending that area, and they are the ones that tend to have the greatest impact. So it might be that you are working with a local supplier to deliver on a particular part of that contract. It could be that you are hiring locally. It could be spending with SMEs. It could be VCSE donations in that particular area. It could be support that you're doing around training in that local area. So there's quite a few different ones. We do actually have an open access version of the TOMS as well. So if you wanted to go and have a look on the website, then that would be a good one to look for. But promoting fair work, giving training and opportunities, spending locally within a supply chain, supporting VCSEs, they all tend to fit within that economy scheme, and that's certainly local to that particular area as well, Ian.
Yeah, I think certainly when you think about, like a large construction project where there's going to be hundreds of people working on a project, if they're
Yeah,
all staying in that local area, staying in the hotels, using the restaurants, etc., that can add up to a significant amount of value.
absolutely, absolutely that. Yeah, and indeed, it can strain and not give opportunities to that local area if you don't. So there's an opportunity cost to not doing as well if you don't do it in that way as well.
Very good. Question here from Hannah Thomas. Thank you, Hannah. So you mentioned that you can capture things you're already doing, but so many clients say you can't count this and it needs to be differential. How do you do that on the sustainability ones if delivering, say, professional services? Um, so I guess there's a part about having that understanding organizationally about social value and what you're going to put
Yeah.
forward. But yeah, I guess each bid, each tender has to have its on its own merit, social value. So yeah, is there something here about carrying forward things that you've done in other projects to kind of evidence that this is something that's integral to your business?
Yeah, it is. And I think what your buyer would have been referring to here is that they're not just looking to see your CSR strategy. They don't just want to see that you've got a social impact report and that you are a good organisation because you have a fair living wage, albeit that might be something that they request. What they are looking for is what you are going to do specific for that local area on that particular contract. That is what they're looking for. So when I said that it might be something that you already do, it could be that you already have a scheme in place whereby you give old IT to a local school. What you might want to do is to say, well, we already know we do that. So on that particular contract, we're going to give those particular computers to that particular local area, for example. Or it might be that you already do a work experience program, but actually because of this contract, you're going to hire and you're going to do some work experience, do some school visits in that local area to explain what you're going to do. So it might be something you already do, but it's tailoring it and focusing it to the needs of that area on that contract. That's what I meant by that.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think if you've got those component parts which you then just apply to that local project, that local community, I think that works. Fabulous. We've got plenty more questions coming through and we will come to them, and there may be a combination of a question that gets asked to Rebecca, but I'm gonna move it on. Thank you so much, Amy. You're going to come back hopefully in about half an hourish for some sort of final wrap up questions. But yeah, I just wanted to move on to Rebecca. Rebecca, as I mentioned at the start, is from South Tyneside Council. Um, just I met Rebecca at a climate change event. So South Tyneside Council is a client that we work with as part of a bigger project we're doing across the entire northeast. And I was asked to come along to a climate change event, and there was a session within that day about social value procurement. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And actually, once Rebecca started talking about the topic, I was really into it. I was really interested in terms of, I think, the organizational aspect and what Amy was talking about there in terms of a buyer sort of looking at this as something for their entire organization. I really got that coming through in terms of how South Tyneside Council are taking forward social value, which is why I was delighted that Rebecca would join us today. So, Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham. Can you hear us okay?
All fine, thank
Yeah,
you.
perfect. Thank you very much. As Graham said, I'm Rebecca Oxby and I work for the procurement department in South Tyneside Council. And my job role is a category and monitoring officer. So half of my job role is to put out tenders, and then the other half of my job role is to monitor social value and ensuring the successful suppliers. That's quite hard to say when you've got a list. Successful suppliers are delivering their social value commitments, which are put in at tender stage. Next slide, please. So hopefully I don't waffle on too much, but basically this presentation is just going to talk about what social value means to South Tyneside and how we actually use it, and more importantly, how we monitor it. Obviously that is my job role. So just to start off with, I'll just talk about why we use social value. So I think we introduced social value in, I could be wrong because obviously this happened before I joined, back in 2016, 2017, I believe. And it was decided that it was a good opportunity to include social value in our tenders, as it gives us the opportunity to include like additional community benefits that go above and beyond the core contract requirements. And then it also gives the opportunity for the suppliers to put forward and actually can score a little bit higher on their overall tender submission. As mentioned before, there is a weighted score allocated to social value, which I'll talk about in more detail in a second. But yeah, they could score a little bit higher on the pledges that they put forward and offer to commit to. Next slide, please. So our current approach to social value is that we do include, and it's mandatory to include social value in contracts that are over 100,000, and that is put in our council constitution. So it is a must that we must include it in contracts over 100,000. We can include it in lower contracts, but I think we found that, if your contract's only worth, I don't know, 30,000, you don't really get that much of an impact on the social value element. So it's a bit of a wasted opportunity. So I think any contracts obviously over 100,000, we definitely do include it. But our Tom's calculator or Tom's measurements that we use are across the 5 themes that Amy mentioned, but I think we just call them something a little bit different. So that's across jobs, growth, social, environment, and innovation. And across those 5 themes, there are 10 measures, which again I'll talk about in a second. Could you go to the next slide, please? So this image, although it's a bit poor quality because the calculator, this is a Tom's calculator that we use, it's quite large. So at a tender stage, so within the council, we're quite lucky, whereas we've got subject matter experts within the council that are allocated to each one of these themes. So on the left-hand side, I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see. But on the left-hand side, on the coloured boxes, they're the themes. So we've got, like I said, you've got the job, growth, social, innovation, and environment. And within the council, we've got an expert allocated to each one of those. So when a contract is going to go out with tender stage, we would send this calculator to those experts along with the contract specification, just to give them an idea of what this contract's going to look like. And then we ask them what measurements or measures do you think is appropriate for this contract, and then they would obviously pick which ones they think out of their theme they deem appropriate for the contract. As you can see, there is 10 measures on here, but a lot of the time obviously 10's never really included, all 10 are never really included in the tender. I think you usually find it's probably about 4 or 5, and a lot of them, 9 times out of 10 anyway, they're definitely the contracts that I monitor or have put out the carbon or the environment section is always included. But that's how we do it. But along with this, when the supplier does complete this, but I will point out as well, it's not a mandatory thing the supplier has to complete, but obviously it is quite helpful because they can get a score on it. So when we go out with tender, the tender evaluation is split between price, quality, and then social value. And social value within the council, I normally use 7%, but I've seen quite a few people use 10, so I'll just use 10 for this example. So we've got a contract, the evaluation is say 10% on social value. That social value is then split down again into qualitative and quantitative. So they get 5% for filling in Tom's calculator, which is the quantitative side. So they must fill in what they propose to commit to in the tender stage offer. And as Amy said before, there's a bit of a calculation that works out. So it's a tender stage offer times by the social value proxy, and then it gives you a monetary value on the social value add column. So that's 5% for that. Whoever scores the highest on the monetary side, obviously they get the full 5 marks for that. And then, but when they fill this in, they also need to provide a method statement to write down how they propose they're going to deliver, or why they've chosen the commitments they've chosen, or put a value against the commitments they've chosen, why they've done it, how they're going to deliver, what they propose to, how they're going to evidence it or measure it, or when they propose they're going to deliver it by. And if they include all that within their message statement, they tend to score quite high. So that's always marked out of 10. And if you include everything and it's a really superb answer, you get full marks for that. So whoever gets the highest marks on the quantitative side, obviously you'll probably score the highest on social value. But then that social value score is then added on to your quality score and the price score. So it is really important, or I always put forward that you should put something in for social value, because sometimes it could make the difference between winning and losing the contract. And I have seen that a couple of times whilst I've been there, where someone's like, oh, I don't want to do that, or they've put a really good score and it's just edged the bet and they've literally just won the contract based on social value. I will note as well, when it comes to evaluating, if the supplier puts a monetary value in, but they don't provide a method statement, they would score 0. Or vice versa, if they could provide a really brilliant method statement, but fail to complete the Tom's calculator, they would score a 0. So it is really important that you make sure that you do complete both parts. I don't think there's anything else in that one. Next slide, please. So for the social value, as I just mentioned before, we have got the 5 themes. So against these 5 themes, the 10 measures are split down. So for the jobs one, that is promoting local skills and employment within the local area. So that does have 4 measures against it. And for example, for 2 of those, that is, for one of them, it could be employing someone locally who lives in the borough postcode area, or you could, offer to do career talks within schools. The next one is growth. So that's support and growth of responsible regional businesses. So that's got 1 measure against it that we've chosen. And that's obviously just how much you spend within the local supply chain. A lot of people tend to go for that one quite, to be honest, because it's obviously quite easy to hit. And then you've got the social one as well, which is healthier, safer, and more resilient communities. That's got 1 measure against it. So that's donation. So that could be like monetary value. So that's donating to, I don't know, a local charity, or you could do in-kind contributions. So that's volunteering at, I don't know, volunteering at a food bank, or volunteering. I know painting a fence is not a very good example, but volunteering to paint a fence. They also have the environment one, which is decarbonisation and safeguarding our world. That's got 3 measures against it. So one of them is your reducing your carbon emissions, and that could be via, although again, this is not a very good example because it's probably common practice nowadays, sorting out to LED light bulbs. And then you've got 2 against the air pollution. Your air pollution is reduced. So this could be from miles driven in low emission vehicles, using either like a hybrid car or a fully electric vehicle, or traveling by a green transport program. So that could go through like cycling to work scheme, or carpooling, or proposing to get public transport instead. I will note, like I said before, environment is probably quite a big one for us, because South Tyneside Council is quite keen on reducing our carbon footprint, and definitely trying to hit net zero by a certain year, which I can't remember the top of my head. So 9 times out of 10, these environment themes are always included, because the guy who does the sustainability and carbon, he's very obviously keen on his job, and he always says, no, carbon's got to be included in this. And then the last one, but not least, is the innovation one. So that's promoting social innovation, and that does have 1 measure against it. So that's just promoting new ideas and finding innovative solutions to old problems. So there are our 10 measures across the 5 themes. Like I say, those 10 measures won't be included. All of them won't be included in 1 contract. We do normally just whittle it down to 4 or 5, depending on what the experts deem appropriate to said contract. Could you go to the next slide, please? The next one, this just goes on a little bit more about the typical pledges that we tend to see suppliers put forward in their method statement. So like I said, when they put forward like a figure in the Tom's calculator, they must support that within a method statement on how they're going to do it. So I've just listed the ones that we tend to see within a submission. So I don't know, we've got support for local little picks there. We've got financial donations, which normally tend to be like food banks or local charities. You know, you're reducing your carbon emissions by, I think a lot of companies now as well have swapped over to low emission vehicles. So, you know, that's the ones when we tend to see people going, oh, I'm going to swap all our fleet vehicles to low emissions. So that's really helpful. And obviously big up the South Tyneside, because like I said, we're really big on carbon and reducing our carbon footprint. And then obviously applying within the local community, people tend to go for that one as well. Can you go to the next one, please? So when a contract has gone out to tender and the experts decide what measures have gone into the tender pack, obviously we put out that tender, the submissions come back, and then it's an evaluation stage. So when a submission comes back, we would send the suppliers Tom's calculator along with a method statement to each individual expert, and then they evaluate against their own theme. Which we're quite fortunate to do that, because I know a lot of other local authorities, the procurement officer evaluates all of it. So if you've got like a carbon growth and job measure in one person would evaluate that, and then it'll just get like an overall one score. But we did start doing it out like that, but then we found that it was quite hard to evaluate it fairly. So if someone's put a really good answer for, I don't know, the job section, so that would score, I don't know, a 6 or something, and then someone scored quite poorly, like the same answer scored quite poorly on the environment section, so they scored a 2. We struggled to figure out what an average would be like. So we were in the lucky position where, you know, the experts said, oh, actually, I would evaluate my own section. So they all just score their own section out of 10, and then we pop it into a little spreadsheet, and if it picks out a form, and it start again. We'll pop all the scores in a spreadsheet. So the score for themes, the score for jobs, the score for growth, the score for environment. And then at the end, it gives you an overall score out of the 5% we used, because of the, say it's 10% overall, but it's 5% for the method statement. And then it gives you an overall score. We found that was just a little bit of a fairer way to do it. And like I said, I know other authorities or companies aren't as lucky to have someone dedicated in each role. But yeah, that works best so far. And I just feel like it keeps it a bit more transparent as well. So once that's evaluated and we find our successful supplier, any contract that has got social value in is then added onto like a big master spreadsheet, obviously, which is just a record for us to show what contracts actually do have social value. That's where I have a delightful job of monitoring it. So then I go into this spreadsheet, and like I say, unfortunately, I am like one person doing this whole job, because before I came into post, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the procurement process, but what we did was when a procurement process ended, we would hand everything over to the client, and that's our job done. And then it was for the client to then contract manage, obviously the contract, which also would include social value. However, we never really knew. Well, I'm going to say it got done, but obviously you never really knew if it got done. And it was really hard to say if someone come up to us and said, okay, how much social value has actually been committed and delivered in the last 6 months. We would like really struggle to find that information, and you'd have to contact X amount of clients to try and gather all the data. So we've decided, the council decided to put me in post. So we've got a bit more of a centralised person. So if someone does come and say how much social value has been delivered in, you know, the last 6 months, I'll be like, oh, okay, I've monitored this. X, this is the value that's been delivered. This is how they've done it. So it's just a bit more of a transparent and easier way of doing it. So like I said, on this spreadsheet, I would go in, and because I'm literally the only person that does it, it is really hard to pick which contracts I would pick up, because I'm only one person. So I deemed the fairest way to do it was either pick the contracts that have the highest monetary social value figure, and or the contracts that have won the contract based on social value. So that social value is just giving them a little bit of an edge, and that's in order to start again, give them a little bit of an edge, and that's how they've won the contract, because obviously that's quite high risk. So those are the contracts that I pick up, and obviously if got a bit more spare time, I would do pick up others. But those are contracts that I mainly focus on at the moment. So what happens on when I pick those contracts, I would obviously get in touch with the client and just say, oh, has anything been delivered so far? Or I'm going to pick this one up. You can leave this one with me. And then I would reach out to the supplier, introduce myself, offer have a Teams meeting, obviously just discuss it further, discuss their Tom's calculator and their method statement, just to get a real idea and picture of how they're going to do it. And then we put forward on how often I'm going to monitor them and have catch-up meetings. So depending how long the contract goes on for, so if a contract only goes on for, I don't know, 6 months, I would say, I would offer a meet with them every month just to make sure they're on track to deliver their social value commitments by the end of the 6 months, because 6 months just flies by. But if it is a longer term contract, say for 5 years, I would offer a meet with them every 6 months. Just obviously, like I said, just to make sure they're on track. Or if they're struggling to deliver social value, I might offer to meet them every 3 months instead. But it's just really, really important that we are on top of this and on the ball of this to ensure that successful suppliers do know that they've committed to this, and that we are on top of it, and that making sure that they are delivering it. But yeah, I will note as well, when they are struggling, the experts within the team are still there for helping hand. So for example, I think a lot of time when I'm monitoring this, anyone who's put forward that they're gonna talk within schools, or I don't know, higher within the local area, they may struggle a little bit with it, because South Tyneside isn't a very big area compared to most. So then if they're having any issues, they would come to me, the supplier would come to me and obviously mention these issues, and then I would go forward. For example, like I just said, a lot of them have struggled to get in touch with schools or deliver within schools. I would get in touch with the two people within the council that, work in that department and go, I've got this supplier, they want to deliver this amount, can you please help them? Because I'm a bit of a middle man or woman. I'm a bit of a middleman at the moment, so I don't actually have all the knowledge for like what's going on in the actual community. I'm just there for like a bit of to report to. So as the council as a whole, I think this is what we struggled with a bit, because it's not really like a streamlined process. So I've only been doing this the past year or so, and so we are trying to create a bit more of a streamlined process, to obviously make it easier for suppliers as well, because it is quite difficult. It's a bit extra on the core of the contract, and we just want to make it a bit more easier and accessible for the supplier. Next slide, please. So I should put the slide in the before the previous one, but as I mentioned before, obviously carbon 9 times out of 10 is included in pretty much every tender. This is probably the ones where some suppliers struggle to evidence it, because I did forget to say that when a supplier does deliver their social value, they are supposed to provide evidence, just to support what they said, because it's very easy to say, oh, I hired 5 people within the local area, but it's quite hard to prove that otherwise. So the social value one, I just wanted to focus on this one a little bit more. So for the social value of the carbon side, because obviously we do use this one a lot, I have just listed a couple of examples of what we tend to see pledge-wise, and then what evidence we expect to see alongside it. So for example, if you half a couple of these are probably more focused on construction jobs than anything else. So for example, the first one is on-site generation. The supplier, maybe at tender stage, is going to say, actually, I'm going to use solar energy going forward, and this is how we're going to go forward. And then for the evidence way, we would normally ask to see pictures of their generation meter. I think that's just to keep track of, to make sure they are using a lower powered source. I don't actually know too much about carbon, so I may be waffling on a little bit more. But then the second point is again, this one's probably more construction focused. They may, for their generator, if they use a generator on site, they may use alternative fuel instead of diesel. So they may use something like HVO instead of diesel. And then what we would expect to see if they have proposed this for evidence-based would be, your alternative fuel invoicing, just to prove that, you've had bought X amount of fuel and this is what you're going to be using. I mean, it's not the most robust way, but we've probably struggled with the energy side a little bit more. For the carbon offsetting, when they've offered to reduce, I don't know, 20 tons of carbon, you usually expect them to go through an accredited body such as, you know, Planet Mark or Smart Carbon, I think you tend to see as well. And they obviously can help them find their benchmark of carbon and then what they offset just to prove that they are doing it. And it is a legit bit of evidence. But yeah, carbon's probably the one that we do struggle a little bit to evidence. As with the other ones, for example, for like the local schools and stuff, or the local employment, you can't request too much information for GDPR purposes. So we just tend to ask for, you know, initials of said person with a live in the area, and then the first 4 digits of the postcode, just to prove that it is a South Tyneside postcode. A lot of the evidence uh is probably like face value, I'm gonna say. So we do have to sometimes just take what the supplier says because you can't question too much. Example for that, local employment, you can't request too much data. But for the ones like donations or spending with the local supply chains, that is definitely easier to evidence, as we just ask for invoices and you can't really fluke an invoice. So that's the evidence side of things. Could you go to the next slide, please? Just touch on this quickly. When I'm delivering and monitoring, I tend to keep everything in one place, or try to keep everything in one place. And like I say, I like to keep it as straightforward as possible for a supplier, especially probably like a smaller supplier who's not really used to or familiar with social value, or not really sure how they can get it across that they delivered social value. So I created a little spreadsheet, although I do admit it's probably not the greatest, but I have created a little spreadsheet that just has, the basic information of the contract, what they committed to. What I'd normally do is I would edit this down to what, the successful supplier is committed to. So it wouldn't have all these 10 measures on. It'll just have exactly what's committed to in that contract. And then along the bottom, it's got the year 1, year 2, year 3 delivery. Oh yeah, I'm nearly finished, sorry. And yeah, 1, year 2, year 3 delivery. And I would give this to the supplier and they can fill it out, and hopefully it keeps them on track. It's quite a simple spreadsheet. It hopefully keeps them on track of what they delivered so far and then what's left to deliver. But if it's a bigger supplier, they tend to obviously, they're really used to delivering social value, and they've used social value for a long time now. They probably have their own way of reporting it. So I do accept that as well. So as long as their reporting method in as like a PDF or whatever is clear and concise and clearly breaks down the evidence and stuff, I would accept that as well. I just made something just to make it a little bit easier for suppliers. I will also note, which I just totally forgot to mention beforehand, when a supplier is delivering their social value, normally in a contract we would have like the initial contract period plus like an extension period. But when they are delivering the social value must be delivered with an initial contract period, just in case the contract is not extended, and then we could have missed out on a little bit of like quite a lot of social value. So we do say you've got to ensure that you can deliver, or what you've committed to is realistic to deliver in X amount of time. The next slide, please. So I've just included a couple of examples. I'll just quickly whiz through these because I'm conscious of time. A couple of examples that have been successful this is probably a good one to use, is the A1A3 Coast Road. So this was awarded to Howard Civil Engineering, and this one was actually done, I think this is just finished maybe last year before. So what happened was there was a road, the A1A3, that was quite close to the cliff edge, and due to the erosion of the cliffside, it was deemed not safe for like public use. So we decided that we'd have to move or realign the road to a bit of a safer distance for cars and pedestrians still be able to use. So that's exactly what happened. And I'll just quickly pick out the carbon ones. Obviously, you can see there on the screen, I don't know how clear that is. They delivered quite a lot of social value through their contract period. But for the carbon ones, they've managed to save 4,202 miles by driving in low emission vehicles. They also swapped to solar energy to power their CCTV that was kept on site. And then they managed to save or offset 110.79 tons of carbon. Not exactly sure how, but it was evidence, and obviously we agreed to sign it off. So that's a really good effort, and just proves how successful it is once you do keep on top of it. Could you go to the next slide, please? This is a bit of a smaller scale one. So this was when South Shields Town Hall had some alterations by Aptus. I don't know if anyone's been to the South Shields Town Hall, but it was a little bit dated. So it decided, because due to being outdated, it was to spruce it up a little bit and create a bit more modern way of working. So we decided to include some more collaborations areas within the floors of the South Tyneside Hall, and include single booths. So if anyone's easily distracted, they could just take themselves in there, which is me. I find them very useful. But this was a bit of a shorter scale one. So within that contract, there was only 3 measures put out at tender stage, and the supplier committed to get all 3 measures. So the local spend, they managed to spend just over 4 grand within the local area. The number of hours of school visits, they managed to do 60. And then the car mile save, I will mention as well that this monetary value, it's got £10.56, obviously doesn't look the greatest, but as Amy said, it's to every one they commit to, the proxy value for this is 6p. So obviously the monetary value is a bit poor, but they did manage to save 172. And I think there was a little bit more at this by the end of the contract. And I will point out this was only a 5-month contract, so it was relatively really, really short, but it was a good effort there. And then the last example I've got is, if you go to the next slide, please, sorry. This is a current project that I've just started monitoring, and this is a community college expansion within the local area. So for this one, there was 3 themes, but 5 measures. Obviously, I'll not go through all, you can just read it quickly. So this is the one that I've just literally picked up in the last month, and going forward, we're going to start monitoring quite closely because it's got a really, really big social value commitment. But yeah, that is that. And I think there was the next slide. Hopefully that wasn't too painful for you and you did find it useful, but I have included my email address there just in case there's any questions that you've got for me. But I've also included our climate change generic email. So if there's anything carbon specific, because like I say, that's not my forte, feel free to direct your email to Michael and Zoe on that email address, and one of them will pick it up in due course.
Brilliant. Thanks,
That's everything
Rebecca.
from me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think we've got, I'm going to move straight to panel. So Amy, if you want to come back, because we've got about 10 minutes left. So, and just looking at some of those questions. So what really struck me about how you're taking this forward, Rebecca, is obviously you've got subject matter experts that are supporting on this. And I think there's an interesting piece here for bidders. Perhaps you've got someone who is heading up social value. Have you got that support? Are you organizationally organized to tackle those themes? I mean, I try to make acronyms out of it. I think yours is slightly works a bit better. So your 5 themes, I come up with jigs. I've only got PWEC for the 4 themes. I can't come up with anything better just yet. But I think that just within organizations, are you really thinking about jobs and innovation and carbon, environment, etc.? Have you got those experts within the business to really help put forward the best case? I guess
Yeah.
there's some interesting questions coming through. And there's a few. I mean, there's one here from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca, about when suppliers are off track. So it is a moving feast, as you said, in terms of the evidence. You're doing what you can. I like the fact that you're striking off stuff through the procurement process. If they've got the evidence but no method statement, no method statement, no evidence, no. So I mean, we're starting off by trying to be as crystal clear in terms of what's going forward. But yeah, this whole subject of ensuring that the social value does come through. How seriously are you taking this, Rebecca? And I guess also Amy, how important are you seeing you're recording all of this social value that's happening? Are we at a point now where we're really getting really tight in terms of people who are off track and penalties potentially for that?
I think so, sorry, and I'll just quickly jump in. I think that's why they brought my post in, my role in post, because, but like I said beforehand, before I came in, it was just handed to the clients to contract manage, and I'm not saying they didn't, but we would never truly know if they were actually on top, because obviously it's just additional to what they wanted when they went out tender. Do you know what I mean? So they probably were more focused on their core contract elements and wanted to make sure that the supplier was delivering the service as expected, but the social value was a bit more of a maybe a bit more of a back thought for the client. So we never really knew if social value was important to them, and if they were making sure it was definitely being delivered. So I think now obviously it's a bit more important. Social value is getting huge now, so it's really, really important to make sure that as a council, if someone put a Freedom of Information Act request in, that we could say we have been on top of social value, this has been delivered, and we can demonstrate that. So a bit more like proactive on that approach now, definitely, compared to what we were, or definitely before I joined anyway. Sorry.
Amy, from your side?
I'd echo what Rebecca said. A lot of the organisations that we work with, certainly when they come to using the TOMs, but then actually using the portal, it is about that contract management piece and helping organisations to deliver on what they've said, both sides. You know, it counts on both sides to make sure that that's actually delivered. What I would say to any public sector organisations that are here is to work with your suppliers, point them in the directions of places where they can actually deliver on these things. And then on the bidder side, on the supplier side, if you're struggling to deliver on a particular initiative, don't just ignore it until the last 6 months of the contract. Have an open conversation with your buyer so that you can look at an alternative commitment that you might want to offer instead. And having those conversations up front at the beginning of contracts is really important in that respect.
I mean, we're an organisation that focuses on measuring, transport, measuring decarbonisation of transport. We've got lots of tools for evidencing that. So I think, it doesn't matter what theme it is, but I think there's a real importance that's coming through here on both sides. Absolutely, this is about both sides delivering for the benefit of communities. Really thinking through how are we going to evidence it? What tools might we need? If we're talking about carbon and reducing vehicle miles, supporting sustainable travel, linking. The other thing I'm really interested in is the linkages between the themes. If you're looking to employ lots of apprentices, well, one of the problems for apprentices is how they get there. So are you thinking as an organization, how can I support those apprentices to get to a job? Is it about carpooling? Can someone who's on the project help bring some other people to it? I think there's a real fascinating opportunity to really integrate these themes, but it's got to come from thinking about the evidence. I think the other thing that's coming through with some of the comments, questions, if you will, is about I guess, the fairness of the system when you are perhaps not a multinational or a national business, potentially when you're delivering service that, for example, there's a question here about tendering for IT contracts. So you're not really on the ground. There might be a little bit of implementation, and therefore, are you making most of sort of stays in hotels and the like? But yeah, how do SMEs, the third sector, there's a question here around the third sector. How do we show more when we're already a little bit constrained as an organization to do stuff? How do we really demonstrate place-based social value when perhaps we're not actually an organization that is there? Any sort of top tips either from both of you there on that kind of whole topic?
I don't mind kicking off if you want me to, Rebecca. Yeah, I mean, well, we've taken all the questions and putting them into one there, Graham. And I think it's on one side we've got local SME, small organisations seeing it as a disadvantage to them because they don't have the scale and the resources to be able to provide good social value. On the other side, we've got a national organisation who might not be in that location. They've got the resources, but they don't have the local expertise. So even in that, there's a bit of a merge to work together to be able to deliver more is one thing I would say. It brings me back to that vendor. It's about understanding your own capability as an organisation and what you actually can deliver. To answer the questions that were about local organisations and how they can actually compete and show what they're actually adding as value in their own right, you have an advantage by being local and knowing what that local area actually needs, using the resources and the networks that you've got, being able to showcase what you've done in hindsight. The questions around additionality, what happens if it was already happening anyway? That additionality point is additional to the core contract requirements. Yes, you might already be doing it, but if you weren't being evaluated on it, shout about it, talk about it. The contract wasn't for that, but you're doing it anyway. Add it in, show that you're doing those things. And then on the national side with the IT side, what can you do that is remote? We are literally living in a remote world right now. I can't comprehend who is joining from where in the UK on this conversation today. You could deliver social value in this exact same way. So thinking outside the box in that way, add your social value in that lens as well, and you could be delivering for those local communities.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Amy said there. I think obviously the bigger companies are probably, a bit more knowledgeable on social value, but sometimes, especially within South Tyneside, like I said, it's a really quite a small area compared to everywhere else. So these local companies, they know exactly, the other local suppliers or what they could spend on local suppliers or what the schools are like, that are proactive and offering volunteering or talks and stuff like that. They're probably a bit more knowledgeable on that. Whereas the bigger companies, sometimes they don't do a little bit of the research, which would I've come across some of the monitoring. They haven't really done a bit of the research within social value. So, for example, I had a contract not long ago, and they said they were going to spend X amount of within the supply chain, and when it come to it, they're like, actually, there's no companies within this local supply chain that can we there's no companies within South Tyneside that we can purchase something that will what we need for our contract. So we were like, well, this should have been researched at the start, but they at the method statement, it's just how it's balanced out, really. But sometimes I think, yeah, it's a bit of both. Sometimes the national ones probably may have a bit of a benefit, but ideally the local ones probably do have a bit of a benefit as well because they know exactly what's going on, especially within a small community like South Tyneside, know exactly what's going on. So it's a bit of both, really.
I guess the question, yeah, this is about the two sides coming together, the buyer and the bidder. And I guess, you know, a little bit like you were saying, you've got that access route. Can potential bidders come talk to you, understand a bit more about, are you there to sometimes support in terms of local? I mean, you mentioned the point about after a contract being kind of um, provided, you were then providing a bit of support in terms of local schools that they could talk to. I mean, is there something here generally about actually both sides coming together so that actually, we're setting up for success? We're not thinking about failure, we're setting up for success. Is that something that's really on your mind, Rebecca, as a council? You want to make sure that that social value comes through?
Ah, massively, yeah. Like I said, especially in the last couple of years, I think social value is become quite more of an important part within the tender stage. So like I said, I don't think social value was included in every tender, but now we've made sure within our council constitution that social value is 110% included in any contract over 100,000. 9 times out of 10, contracts are worth more than that, so it's always included. And I think this is why I've again been brought in so that I can have a bit more of a personal relationship with said supplier to ensure that they do want to deliver social value, because I think you do find that suppliers, including like smaller ones, are really, really keen on social value and they're trying to be a bit proactive on it. They just need a bit more of a direction. So yeah, social value has definitely been more of a talk about of point within the tender stage, and we do include it in pretty much all tenders nowadays. And yeah, we're a bit more proactive on it, ensuring that it is delivered and the support is there for suppliers that are struggling or need that
Amazing.
contact within schools and stuff.
Fantastic. Look, we've hit 11:30. I knew we'd take up the 90 minutes. I think there's been so much information. I hope people can obviously then go back and look at the video. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Rebecca. We'll finish off there. I think there's massive opportunity. What I'm taking from this is opportunity, massive of opportunity on both sides to work together. Definitely, I'm really interested in the carbon piece and the fact that we need to get more evidence. So let's keep these conversations going. But thank you for support today, and thank you everyone for joining. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.